The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Congratulations to the people in the audience who wrote to me and they said that this was going to happen. And it did happen. Donald Trump now is saying he misspoke during that abortive, arguably traitorous press conference with Vladimir Putin in Helsinki. And I sort of found it difficult to prepare for this story because I want to make clear that this is a known way to confuse people and to make them stop seeking out the actual truth because it's just so confusing and difficult to figure out who can be believed and what the truth is. And for years now, I've been telling you that when Trump does this thing where he says one thing in one interview, next interview, he says the opposite. Third interview, he denies ever even having commented on the topic, even though we've now got two opposing positions about it. Then he tweets that the second interview was actually misquoting the first. This actually serves a purpose, two purposes, really. Number one is that it puts Trump on record at some point on like 4 or 5 different points of view. So if you're one of his followers and you like the first position he took, but not the second and not the third, and then after those 3 positions, he said he never talked about it, you now can cherry pick and say, no, I'm okay with what he said because the first thing he said is what I agree with, or he didn't even actually comment on it. It's the fake news. That's sort of one advantage or feature, I guess we would call it, of this tactic. Number 2, and this is the more insidious one, it makes it so that people stop caring about figuring out the truth because it's just too difficult, and it gives Trump a de facto pass. And this is straight out of Aldous Huxley's Brave New World. Neil Postman wrote about this, and I quote Neil Postman when he wrote, "What Orwell feared were those who would ban books. What Huxley feared was that there would be no reason to ban a book, for there would be no one who wanted to read one. Orwell feared those who would deprive us of information. Huxley feared those who would give us so much that we would be reduced to passivity and egoism. Orwell feared that the truth would be concealed from us," and this is the key line, "Huxley feared the truth would be drowned in a sea of irrelevance." And this is the perfect analogy to what's going on right now with Trump, Putin, and the Helsinki summit. Trump now says, when during the Putin press conference, he said, I don't see any reason why it would be Russia that hacked or meddled in the election. What he meant to say was the exact opposite, which was, I don't see any reason why it wouldn't be Russia. How convenient, right? So now the entire story among the right is going to be to refute the obvious subjugation of the Oval Office by Russia and all that was evidenced in that press conference by saying, guys, Trump misspoke, which of course, whether or not you believe Trump misspoke on that one sentence does nothing about the entire rest of the press conference. What Trump is arguing is that one word, would versus wouldn't, explains away 45 minutes of being cucked and making it abundantly clear that he is a captive of Vladimir Putin and Russia. And who would fall for this, Pat? Oh, we know who would fall for it because they've fallen for it all along, and this stuff works on Trumpists.
Yeah, and even if you are generous to Trump and accept that he did misspeak, he still bungled it, right? You have to get it right. There has to be some preparation. It's a long 45-minute press conference. You had no time to correct the record and all of that.
The interviews he did right after, he didn't say, you know, I realized I said the exact opposite of what I meant. He continued in both his tone and his statements to portray the exact same point of view. Trump is saying, even though he was super clear in his language, his tone was totally unambiguous about whether he understood exactly what he was saying. He's now claiming he actually meant the exact opposite. And the next step will be that in 7 to 10 days, Trump will deny ever having commented one way or the other. He'll say, I've reserved judgment. Well, hold on a second. No, you haven't reserved judgment. You said one thing during the press conference, then you said that you misspoke and you actually believed the other thing. And once again, in the multiple interviews that Trump did after the press conference, he didn't think to correct this supposed misstatement. But now we're expected to believe that he meant the opposite of what he said. Additionally, Trump read this entire thing off of a piece of paper, which doesn't exactly communicate feelings of genuine belief. I've got the clip, and you'll see that having this piece of paper in front of him and reading this statement communicates even less believability and strength.
I have full faith and support for America's great intelligence agencies, always had. And I have felt very strongly that while Russia's actions had no impact at all on the outcome of the election, let me be totally clear in saying that, and I've said this many times, I accept our intelligence community's conclusion that Russia's meddling in the 2016 election took place. Could be other people also. There's a lot of people out there. There was no collusion at all. And people have seen that, and they've seen that strongly. The House has already come out very strongly on that. A lot of people have come out strongly on that.
How great is that? There are a lot of people out there. Sir, we have you on camera killing a man. You also left a note for your wife saying you're going out and you're going to kill the man. We also have video of you writing that note, and your fingerprints are on the gun, and the gun is registered to you. Listen, there's 7 billion people on this planet. Do you know the mathematical odds that it was me? They are 1 in 7 billion. It couldn't possibly have done it. Could be anybody, right? We are a laughingstock, and this is, a lot of times the analogy made is to 1984. I believe the more precise analogy is to Aldous Huxley's Brave New World, which you have famously read, right, Pat? That's a book that you are on record as having read.
Oh, yeah. And we all have to take Soma now in order to be able to get through the next couple of years of the Trump administration.
Yeah, Pat's high on Soma right now. It's crazy. We're actually, it's not even really Pat. It's a hologram because Pat is completely Soma'd up. We're a laughingstock, and that's really an embarrassment. Killing Obamacare. Killing Obamacare has been an obsession of, number one, Republicans when Obama was still president. Remember the dozens and dozens, what was it, 60, 70, 80 attempts to...
61?
61 votes to repeal Obamacare in the House. And number two, getting rid of Obamacare has been a priority of Donald Trump's since he's become president of the United States. And what he has been able to do to attack Obamacare are basically two things. Number one, Trump's tax reform plan removed that individual mandate from the tax plan, and that piece of it, I think you said, Pat, doesn't get enacted until next year, is it? The actual removal of the mandate?
Yeah, not entirely sure about that one.
Yeah, at some point that gets enabled, and that will make it so that you no longer pay a penalty if you don't have individual health insurance. That is meant to financially destabilize the system. It's meant to hurt Obamacare to create a pretext to then get rid of it. Number two, Donald Trump's administration abruptly suspended payments to Obamacare programs. And as I've talked to you about before, if you can't get rid of the law, get rid of the money that makes the law work. And the administration is doing indeed that. $10.4 billion in payments to insurers were suspended abruptly by the Trump administration. The insurers, of course, immediately said, well, if we don't get this money through the ACA arrangement, we're just going to increase premiums on customers to make up the difference. And withholding these funds is such a disaster that the Republican chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee, Republican Congressman Kevin Brady, not exactly a moderate Republican, a pretty far-right ideologue, he is now asking the Trump administration to restart those payments. And as a reminder, this guy's hugely against Obamacare, and he recognizes the disaster that this is, and the House Ways and Means Committee recognizes how much of a disaster this is. The Republicans are so concerned about the elimination of these payments that they are considering legislative action to force the payments to restart. Republican president stops the payments, Republican committee leader might pass legislation to start them back up. Think about how insane this is. And by the way, don't think for a second that Republicans are doing this because of some moral responsibility that they feel. The midterms are coming. That's all it is. Democrats are already starting to talk about the rising premiums that have been taking place and are going to continue with these funds suspended. And Republicans know that they will suffer if premiums continue to explode because of this decision by Donald Trump. For all we know, as soon as the midterms are over, the Republicans will go back to Trump and say, have at it. You can resuspend those payments. We don't have an election coming up. But for the bottom-dwelling Trumpists who are supposedly fiscal conservatives, they are already saying, Pat, this is taxpayer money. This is good. This is $10.4 billion in taxpayer money that's not being used for Obamacare. And to them, I would say, you were wrong. This is money collected from insurers whose pool of customers is on average healthier and redistributed to the insurers, who are doing a good thing, mind you, insuring less healthy people. It's a redistribution meant to not penalize insurance companies for insuring less healthy people. It's insurance company money. It's not taxpayer money.
Yeah, so unless the American people are just by and large looking out for the good of big insurance companies,
great business
this really
to look out
shouldn't
for.
bother them that much.
There is such a heartwarming sentiment for the corporate health insurance industrial complex in this country that it makes perfect sense that people would have a special place in their heart for these. Oh, wait a second. What the hell am I talking about? Most important overarching story here is that for 7 years, the Republicans slammed Obamacare. They took 60-something votes in the House to repeal it, knowing it would never happen. They campaigned, and so did Trump, on as soon as Trump is in office, it's out. Obamacare is out. And the public is opposed to the repeal of Obamacare. Every iteration proposed by Republicans to repeal Obamacare would have led to tens of millions or multiple tens of millions, I guess is what I mean, of people ending up without health insurance. And what they're doing instead is they're taking these small cuts at Obamacare to further try to sabotage it, or sabotage, if you are of William Shatner's pronunciation, sabotage Obamacare from succeeding. Great leadership and vision, right? 7 years to come up with something. Everything they propose is garbage. They can't get it done. And now Republicans are going to Trump and saying, please restart these payments.
Yeah, and Republicans now own the issue of health care, right? Because you can't just gut the Affordable Care Act and do nothing to replace it. And I don't know what they're going to do going forward, but if this is their only strategy, it's not going to be very good for them.
That's an empirical analysis based on actual facts and data. I am not convinced that, short of exploding premiums, even above like the underlying increase in premiums, that Republican hardline voters are actually going to say that it's Republicans who are to blame for this, because you know what? They'll say, it's Obamacare. If Obama hadn't put this in place in the first place, the fact that it's not working right wouldn't matter. Forget the fact that it's Republicans who are making sure that it doesn't work correctly. Really bad. Really bad. And we will see what impact it has on the election. But more importantly, people's lives are at stake. Republicans are playing politics with this because they want to get reelected in 3-4 months, however long it is at this point. And people's lives actually depend on this stuff. Send me your thoughts about these atrocities that are taking place. I'm on Twitter at @DPakman, and the show is on Twitter at David Pakman Show.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Let me say a big thank you to Dylan Chow. Dylan Chow is today's new David Pakman Show member of the day. This is viewer-supported media. This is audience-supported media. We don't have trees that have money growing on them. We don't have corporate overlords that funnel us money like so many corporate media programs. We depend primarily on the support through membership of people like Dylan Chow. And on that note, I want to thank Jamel Lewis, who's been with us since 2012, nearly 6 years of membership for Jamel. Dylan, Jamel, thank you. Join them at www.joinpakman.com. If you want a 40% discount off of your membership, you can use the coupon code VOTESOON18. Just another reminder that you got to vote in November, please. And you can also make pledges of as little as $1 a month at patreon.com/David Pakman Show. More on that later, though. I don't want to delay getting to this week's Hatriot Mail anymore. This is what Hatriot Mail is.
The right of the people to keep and bear hate shall not be infringed. Hatriot Mail. Written by patriots who hate David Pakman. Because America. And because freedom.
The topical nature of this week's Hatriot Mail relates to what's going on with immigration. It relates to, quote, Mexicans and arbitrary definitions of what it means to be a real man. I think that's about all I want to say as far as introducing it. Take a listen to this week's Hatriot Mail.
The David Snowflake Pakman and his zombie moron fans are salty and triggered. LOL. Pakman like wet paper towels. Wimpy, wimpy, wimpy. LMAO. David, anyone who isn't a socialist is wrong. Pakman. Deport Pakman ASAP. Immigrants cannot be trusted in our military. We need men in this country, not a boy in a man's body like of little Mexican 5 feet tall men.
Yeah, you know, there is this stereotype that Mexican men are very small, but Mexico, in terms of height, is sort of in the middle worldwide. It's not actually a place where people are that short. There's this caricaturization of the Mayan people who are significantly smaller in stature, but whatever idea of a man this Hatriot has, I would encourage you to visit just about any kitchen at the top restaurants in the major American cities and tell me that you're not seeing manly behavior going on in those kitchens by disproportionately Mexican and Latin American, El Salvador, many other countries, men. And quite frankly, this idea, this is a toxic idea, isn't it? That the stereotypical, even if you imagine them as a shorter stature, Latin man is somehow less masculine. I mean, these are toxic ideas.
Yeah, and you may be surprised to hear that this hatred is not being very clear, right? Does he not want immigrants in the American military or Mexicans in the American military?
Or 5 foot tall men.
Would he support 6'2" Scandinavian men? Like, is that okay?
Well, they're mostly white. So yes, I assume that they probably would. Those would be real men. Also, I'm getting attacked in this Hatriot Mail for being a socialist, even though I'm also getting attacked this week by all of the socialists in our audience who are mad that I'm not a socialist, which I very clearly explained on Monday.
Yeah, but that clip was like 12, 14 minutes long. A Hatriot's not going to sit through that.
Fair point. There's no way anybody actually sat through that. If you want to send a middle finger to the Hatriots, use the coupon code Hatriot40 when you sign up for membership at www.joinpakman.com. Every single time that the coupon code Hatriot40 is used, 21 Hatriots cry. Just the tears start flowing. So I encourage you to use that coupon code. Okay, so we have had a very, very interesting reaction, sort of two-sided reaction to my appearance over the weekend on Fox News. Not Fox News Online, not a local Fox affiliate, but good old-fashioned right-wing ideologue Fox News. And I appeared alongside Dom Giordano, a Philadelphia radio host, and it was hosted by Leland Vittert. And we did a full analysis of the clip on Monday's show. And I expressed that I had had some uncertainty about appearing and that I spoke to Kyle Kulinski from Secular Talk, and he said, any opportunity to get the message out is an opportunity to maybe change someone's mind. So it is worth doing. And I was initially pretty bummed because the immediate feedback I received after being on Fox was 99% negative. Why? Because it was from the Fox News audience. It was people who saw my actual appearance on Fox. Since then, in the 48 hours since we did our analysis of how the interview went, the feedback has been stunningly positive. More emails and tweets about it by far than about anything that we've done recently. I heard from, and this is an exciting thing, I heard from a Nobel Prize winning economist about the appearance, who felt that even if it didn't go exactly as I would have wanted, that it's very clear that doing this is worthwhile, that they did appear stumped by my pushback, at least at some point, and that if I did it more regularly, I would just become more comfortable with it. Thank you, by the way. Who even knew that Nobel Prize winning economists were fans of the show?
That's awesome.
Right? I mean, that's incredible. They're mostly fans of Pat, actually, but, you know, whatever. He was friendly to me as well, which is nice. Tons and tons of new members, ranging from, I mean, a ton of people signing up with the 40% off code, paying $3.60 a month. Several people so impressed with the appearance that they signed up for what we call the big dog, the highest membership level of $480 for the year. So first and foremost, huge, sincere thank you. I mean, it just means so much. It's been a tough year and a half, as people know on the show. And I just appreciate everybody's support and the outpouring. And whether it's people who become members or sign up on Patreon, even just contacting America's News headquarters at Fox News and saying, have David back on, the support has been incredible, and the community building that I feel as a result of this has been great. Some media people who follow the show but ask not to be named because they may be connected to Fox News in some way also said, listen, I know that you don't think that you did that well, because I am very hard on myself, but they felt that, particularly for my first live appearance on Fox News, I've been on Fox in edited formats before, that they thought it was really good. So I think that I probably am a very harsh critic. I already know 4 or 5 things that I would do differently next time. But I think at this point, this has been a major success, even if for no other reason than the support it's built for our show.
Yeah, I think all of us are our own biggest critics, right? Now I was trying to express to you that you did an excellent job, but you weren't hearing it from me. You were just brushing it off at first.
Now, the Hatriot feedback has continued to be absolutely abhorrent and deplorable. And the anti-Semitism that I'm hearing from the right-wingers, all sorts of just ad hominems and slurs and whatever, but that's to be expected. And everybody in the audience knows that I'm used to that, and that does not throw me off the trail, and it's just escalated because of appearing on Fox News, right? If you imagine that in our audience there are enough Hatriots, even though this is mostly a progressive audience, that we get a flood of hate mail every single day. Just imagine what it's like when a progressive appears on an actual right-wing news outlet like Fox News.
Yeah, everything about this Fox News segment went exactly as expected, from the sandbagging to the line of questioning to them getting stumped to the anti-Semitism and comments that followed as a response. Yeah,
nothing unsurprising, including the absolutely atrocious lighting on me compared to the lighting on the other guests. So down to the finest detail. Last thing, opportunity to mention. I mentioned yesterday that we are putting it to an audience vote whether we continue live calls or not on the show. We've gone back and forth. We've received feedback. Some people want live calls. Some people don't want live calls. We announced yesterday that we are taking votes by Patreon contribution. If you want live calls on the show, you make a contribution of any amount ending in 01, right? So $1.01 or $2.01. Every single .01 donation at patreon.com/David Pakman Show is a vote for live calls. If you don't want live calls, you make any contribution that you want at patreon.com/David Pakman Show, except it ends in 02. So if you wanted to vote against live calls, Pat, as you maybe do, I don't know, you would make a contribution of $1.02 or of $2.02. They are rolling in.
Yep.
This is a very contentious thing, and I look forward to getting the final results next week.
Yeah, and I read through the David Pakman Show Constitution yesterday.
Yeah.
It does not ban a poll tax like the U.S. Constitution
That's correct.
does. So this is perfectly fine. We can do this.
Completely legal, completely constitutional, and I will probably address this in my State of the Show address early in 2019, sort of as a bigger picture issue for the program.
I like that one.
Yeah. Okay, we have a fantastic program still coming up for you. We are finally going to dig down into what on earth is happening with Democrats and voting in the 2018 midterms. I'm extraordinarily worried, and we're going to talk to Bill Scher about it next. And we will also have clips and so much other stuff coming up. I'm glad you're with us. Join us and discuss any of these topics on the David Pakman Show subreddit at davidpakman.com/REDDIT.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
It's great to have Bill Scher back on the program. He's the contributing editor to Politico Magazine. He is also host of the New Books in Politics podcast. It's part of the New Books Network. And I mean, Bill, listen, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I'm scared about the midterms. I saw unheralded, previously for a long time unseen levels of enthusiasm early in Trump's first term. My feeling anecdotally is that some of that excitement has waned. We've got a new PRRI poll which says only 28% of young adults are certain they're going to vote in 2018. Is my fear warranted at this point?
Well, there's healthy fear and there's paralyzing fear. It's good to have a healthy fear.
Yeah, I'm not paralyzed, but you know.
You don't want to get cocky. You don't want to assume that everything's just going to fall into place. And it's preordained that Democrats take back the House. That's not useful. The evidence so far, I mean, there's a debate whether you should look at polling more or special election performance more. Mm-hmm. All the special elections we've had up to now have shown Democratic overperformance and Republican underperformance. There's definitely more enthusiasm on the Democratic side of the coin, and you can, I think a fair assumption would be Democrats are obviously highly outraged what's going on with Trump, so they're motivated to turn out. Republicans, part of Trump's victory was premised on Trump-only voters that came out for him. And if he's not on the ballot, there's going to be an enthusiasm drop on their side, similar to what happened with Obama in his presidency. When he wasn't on the ballot, Democratic turnout was lower. So I think there's a lot of positive signs in that regard, at least in terms of the House. That doesn't necessarily translate to the Senate because there's so much Democratic turf being defended, especially in states that Trump won, which makes that much more uphill for Democrats. So the likeliest scenario is Democratic House, Republican Senate. They could even go in opposite directions. Democrats gain seats in the House and lose seats in the Senate.
So let's take those sort of in two parts. I mean, number one, the enthusiasm that you rightly identify and the anger, I feel like is waning, not necessarily because people are forgetting or don't care, but because of the hyper-normalization that's going on. Every week there's 5 scandals, new lows in lack of decorum and geopolitical diplomacy and norms. People are becoming desensitized to it. I mean, it's obviously happening to me because I talk about this stuff every day. But even other people, every new scandal is sort of like, yeah, what's one more scandal at this point? And that really is concerning to me.
It's certainly something to be aware of. You don't want to become complacent. But I just haven't seen evidence on the ground. I mean, the primary turnout in every Democratic contest has been very high. Now, that's not just Trump. That's also many competitive races. If there's a sense that a race is not preordained, you're more likely to show up. But if you're in a district that has always been a fait accompli for Republicans to win, and now you have 7 Democrats running in that district, and so you show up to see who the Democrat's going to be, that shows evidence of interest. And we haven't seen that kind of drop off in the actual primary. Now, we're in a period right now in July where there's a bit of a primary low. We had a bunch in May and June. There's not as many this month. That it starts to kick up again in August and September. Then you're into the general election period. So you just may be feeling some summer doldrums that are going to start kicking in once we get to the fall.
What about the special election? So I go back and forth on this. I think that you can find data to get excited about in the special elections, and you can find data like, for example, that even when in Alabama, Republicans ran a serial accused child sexual assaulter, Democrats only barely won in what, yes, is a very, very red state. And I'm just not totally sure how to parse the special election results.
Well, I would look at it a different way. When Doug Jones beat Roy Moore, people treated it at the time as, well, the guy was an accused sex offender, a child molester. So that doesn't give you any kind of insight into what's going to happen in other races and states. Yeah. But then a couple months later, Connor Lamb wins in Western Pennsylvania, where there was no scandal involving the Republican candidate. This was also this wasn't as red an area as Alabama, but still pretty red. Trump did very well there. And the candidate ran, they tried at the time to really push tax cuts as a saving grace. It was only a few months after the tax cut bill passed, and that proved not to be a saving grace. Even though Connor Lamb was critical of it, he still was able to win that race. So I don't think we have a situation where Democrats are winning for fluky reasons. I think there's a general pattern of Democratic bases being excited and Republican bases being deflated, relatively speaking. I mean, there's still obviously dire Trump loyalists out there, but Trump just barely won with not just his diehard support, but also more marginal soft support. And those folks seem to not be showing up for these special elections. And we'll see what happens in November, but that's the pattern so far.
In terms of what's riding on this, I am very concerned about net neutrality. I'm concerned about more Supreme Court justice selections. I think it's almost a foregone conclusion that if Republicans control the House and Senate after the midterms, that it doesn't matter what Mueller finds, it's just nothing's going to happen. What do you identify as the areas where the most is riding on this midterm election?
Well, if Democrats can take the House, then you're going to stymie any more Trump legislation. You're not going to have another big tax cut. You're not going to build the wall. But the Senate is obviously the tougher road. But without Democrats controlling the Senate, you can't block judges. So, I agree with you, Brett Kavanaugh. You seem to imply I think Brett Kavanaugh is probably going to get on the court. I think it's probably correct. There's no evidence that Susan Collins or Lisa Murkowski is going to jump ship.
Right.
And if they don't jump ship, you're probably going to see Joe Manchin, Heidi Heitkamp, John Tester, Joe Donnelly, Doug Jones. Those people are probably going to vote for Kavanaugh, knowing this is already a done deal. It's kind of a free vote. I'm not the person who's deciding he's going to be on the court, so I might as well get some bipartisan points for jumping on the bandwagon. That might make some Democrats really angry that the Democrats in Senate couldn't be united. But what you really don't want is for Tester, Heitkamp, Manchin, Donnelly. You don't want those guys to lose in November, because if you're ever going to stop any more Trump judges, you need those guys in the Senate and getting a few more on top of that. So I don't think I wouldn't give high odds of Democrats taking the Senate, but it's not implausible. And you still, if you care about judges, you want to make sure you're picking up seats in the Senate if at all possible.
One of the criticisms when looking at some of the races you talked about, but then also some of the races that have different dynamics, and I hear this criticism from people who are to the left of the Democratic Party and also to right-wingers. They write to me and they say, David, what are Democrats running on? Like, what is the Democratic platform for the midterms? And my instinctual reaction is that there doesn't necessarily have to be such a defined party platform, because we're talking about state level races and the dynamics of those races sort of differ. Two questions to you. Number one, is there some broader Democratic platform that is visible across the candidates in the 2018 midterms? And number two, is it actually necessary, or are these really all different races with different dynamics?
Well, they're definitely different races and different dynamics. There is an attempt at a national platform led by Chuck Schumer called A Better Deal. I don't think you're seeing a whole lot. I don't think you're seeing consensus around candidates embracing that or even using the language. And let's face it, there are divides in the Democratic Party. So some candidates who are winning primaries are more quote unquote establishment and doing things along the lines of, let's fix the Affordable Care Act. Let's invest in infrastructure, things that are left of center, but relatively safe positions to take. Then, of course, you have people who are more economically populist or Bernie-crat or Democratic socialists, like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, the most obvious example. There's also Kara Eastman in Omaha, in Nebraska 2nd, the Omaha area. These are folks who are more pro-single payer. Some are saying abolish ICE. Some are talking about more widespread free college, things like that that are not necessarily blessed by Democratic HQ in Washington. So whatever you or I think is the right thing to do or what's best for Democrats, the fact is people are going to run differently in different races, partly because of the terrain involved, partly because of who wins these primaries. And I don't think it's going to be debilitating for Democrats in November, because most people are going to come out in opposition to incumbent Republicans and not worry so much about difference amongst Democrats. When you get to 2020, which is going to start happening as soon as the 2018 midterms are over, all this litigation is going to really escalate. Who had the better idea in the midterms? Which candidates? If Kara Eastman wins in Nebraska, you got a strong argument that, hey, single payer can win in Nebraska. We should run this across the board. If the more establishment type candidates are winning in the swing areas, those folks are going to say, look, Ocasio-Cortez is great in Bronx and Queens. That's not what we need in Ohio and Montana and Missouri. So we got to watch closely to see how well these people do come November. In the meantime, you're going to have to get used to differences of opinion and differences in strategy. Yeah,
you mentioned a couple times there Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez from the New York 14th District, who defeated the incumbent Democrat who I believe didn't even show up to debate her. How much Or let me put it a different way. What can we draw more generally from the results of that primary? And what does that primary not tell us about the broader direction of Democrats in 2018?
I think what you can draw from it is that there is a vibrant Democratic socialist faction that has made significant inroads into the Democratic Party.
Okay, now stop right there. Before we got to clarify this because this has been a point of such confusion. When you say democratic socialist, do you mean socialist in terms of socializing the means of production, or do you mean social democracy in the mode of Sweden? Because even they seem confused about what they mean by it.
Yeah, I don't know if I can even define that. I think there's a debate going on within socialist circles what the definition of socialism means.
Okay.
Which has been going on, for a century.
Yeah.
And it's kicking up anew.
So self-described democratic socialist, whatever it is they mean by it.
That's all I can say about it. 'Cause I'm just using their language.
Yeah.
And there is a Democratic Socialist of America. They are endorsing candidates. A handful of those candidates are winning places.
Yep.
That's a hell of a lot better than they were doing, 1 year ago or 2 years ago.
Right.
So you have to acknowledge, they're here and they're kicking up some dust. You can't say just because Ocasio-Cortez won a low turnout primary in a very, very blue district that Democratic Socialists are taking over the entirety of the Democratic Party, that this is a winning message in swing areas. It just has nothing to say about that. So this is the same day that she won in upstate New York in a more conservative district, Antonio Delgado won his primary. He's a corporate attorney, and he did not run on a Bernie Crap platform, and he beat people who were. In Maryland 6, rural suburban district, David Trone, who's a multimillionaire wine mogul, he beat someone running on a single-payer platform. And you go back to other races, the famous Texas 7, where the DCCC, went nuclear on Laura Moser, dropping Oppo research on her during the primary, and people went ballistic. How dare the Democrats do this? And this is only going to backfire against them. She made the runoff, but then she got trounced in the runoff against another corporate attorney. I mean, she's not running as a right winger; she's running left of center, but she wasn't running a populist campaign. This is an upscale Houston suburb. My only point is that different kinds of people are winning in different districts. Yeah. And like I said, it's not just Ocasio-Cortez in deep blue Bronx and Queens. You have Kara Eastman in suburban Omaha. So I'm not saying the left isn't winning in other places, but it's in primaries. So we need to see how well these folks do in the general. Ocasio-Cortez winning where she won to tell us anything about who's going to win in a swing area in the general.
You and I have spoken before about what may not be winning issues for Democrats, and you've even gone so far as to sometimes talk about losing issues for Democrats. A couple I want to sort of just run by you are, number one, debt and deficit. At this point, particularly because it's not Trump that they are running against, at least not directly, I spoke to Mitt Romney's opponent earlier this week, and she's talking a lot about debt and deficit, and I just am unsure that that's really a winning issue at this point in this particular climate for Democrats. Number two, after the sort of activism from the Florida Parkland students around guns has started to sort of fade, you're not hearing that much nationally about guns, although it is playing a role at sort of the more local level. Can you comment on debt and guns, and then if you think that there are issues Democrats should stay away from right now?
Debt and deficit are always very tempting for Democrats to pursue when Republicans are in power, because Republicans are often hypocrites. They complain about debt and deficit when Democrats are in charge. They get in power and they run up the deficit. So it's very tempting to say, look at those folks. They don't mean what they say. But you got to be careful about that, because if you're then implying, put me in charge and I will tame debt and deficit, well, you might be, tying your own hands about what you can do once you get in charge. It's possible that it is a perfectly fine electoral message. It's not going to fire up the base, but to the extent you're trying to win in swing areas and pick off right-leaning swing voters, it may well be a useful message to use. But I think you got to be extraordinarily careful how you use it, because you don't want to shut off policy avenues that you want to pursue once you get into power.
Bill Scher, contributing editor to Politico Magazine, host of the New Books in Politics podcast that's part of the New Books Network. Bill, pleasure as always.
Thank you.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Vladimir Putin told Trump at their meeting that Russia didn't meddle in the 2016 election and Russia didn't do the hacking. And Putin said it strongly and powerfully, according to Donald Trump, and Trump seemed to believe him. And in fact, he believed him so much that later the same day, he said it to Sean Hannity. And while some Fox anchors found this Trump-Putin bouquet throwing contest to be the straw that broke the camel's back, not Hannity, who is loving it. Remember, O.J. Simpson said he was innocent, and he said he would help track down the real killer. Isn't that an incredible offer he made? And it's very similar to the incredible offer that Putin made to have some of the people being investigated by Mueller participate in the investigation and try to figure out what it is that went on. Take careful consideration of this interview. This is what in some circles counts as an interview. This counts as journalism, what I'm about to play for you. The Fox News audience apparently considers this to be legitimate and worthy of an audience. Take a look.
Mr. President, great to see you.
Thank you very much, Sean.
You literally just finished the press conference with President Putin moments ago. A lot came up. You were very strong at the end of that press conference. You said, where are the servers? What about what Peter Strzok said? Where are the 33,000 emails? And there was this mystery answer that I think surprised a lot of people by the president of Russia as it relates to the Mueller investigation.
Right. Well, first of all, he said there was no collusion whatsoever. I guess he said as strongly as you can say it. They have no information on Trump. It was an interesting statement, too. You know, many years ago when I was there, what was it, 13, 14, a long time ago, he said there were many, many business people there. In all fairness, I was a very successful businessman, but I was one of a lot of people. And one thing you know, if they had it, it would have been out.
He said it was nonsense.
He said it's nonsense, is right. And he also said there's absolutely no collusion, which you know, and everybody that watches your show knows. And I think most of the country knows, and Tucker standing right over there definitely knows, because he gets it. He's one of the people that get it. But I'll tell you that I thought it was a really amazing time. Not about that. I think it's a shame. We're talking about nuclear proliferation. We're talking about Syria and humanitarian aid. We're talking about all of these different things, and we get questions on the witch hunt. And I don't think the people out in the country buy it, but the reporters like to give it a shot. I thought that President Putin was very, very strong.
What does that mean that he was strong? That he convinced Trump is what he means. And this was a total gong show interview. Trump said during the interview that Peter Strzok probably was working with Obama to plot against Trump. There's no evidence of that. Trump claimed Putin said there's no compromising info on Trump. Putin did the opposite. Putin didn't once deny that he has the information about Donald Trump. But most importantly, Trump said, listen, Putin said no collusion, no hacking, and that's that. And the authoritarian dictator with a history of playing games and telling lies said it, so it must be true. And now this is where it gets really wild. Trump says Putin said they didn't interfere. But previously, Trump blamed Obama for not stopping the interference. Both can't be true, right? Obama can't be guilty of allowing interference that didn't happen. What Trump's position is that Russia didn't meddle, but if they did, it was Obama's fault for not stopping it, which is actually a really great position for a lot of Trumpists. And Fox News here has chosen, or at least Hannity has, after Donald Trump rendered arguably the most embarrassing performance by an American president in decades, Hannity decided to bring him on his channel to promote the treachery and the surrender to a foreign power. And I want to bring up the thought experiment once again. Imagine Obama meets with bin Laden, comes out and says, listen, we've got two sides. We've got our American intelligence. They say that bin Laden did 9/11. But bin Laden was very strong when he met with me, and he says they didn't do it. And really, why would bin Laden do it? He would just end up getting himself killed, right? And of course, people would say very good. Hey, listen, the president said it, so I've got no questions.
Yeah, political opponents of Trump should make note of this, right? If Trump charges them with something, all they have to do is deny it strongly, right? Like Hillary Clinton could have said, I didn't delete the 30,000 emails.
She was very strong on it,
Trump
Pat.
would have believed her.
Why would an ex-KGB commander who has been clearly determined to destabilize the Western democratic world for the gain of Russia lie to an American president? Wouldn't do it. Just makes absolutely no sense. Now, I do want to give you some other perspectives that existed on Fox News after this just treacherous and ridiculous press conference between President Donald Trump and President Vladimir Putin. Hannity did it. Hannity had Trump on after the summit. He promoted Trump. He said how strong Trump was. Not everybody did, though. Neil Cavuto from Fox News, I think he's on Fox News and Fox Business now. Neil Cavuto called it disgusting. Okay, here's an example of a Fox host who it was just too much even for them to tolerate.
And the place. This was the time and the place for the president to look Putin squarely in the eye and said, you will be punished for what you did in 2016 and don't ever think about doing that again.
But he didn't. And that's what made it disgusting. That's what made his performance disgusting. I'm sorry, it's just the only way I feel. It's not a right or left thing to me. It's just wrong. A U.S. president on foreign soil talking to our biggest enemy or adversary or competitor, I don't know how we define them these days, is essentially letting the guy get away with this and not even, offering a mild criticism. That sets us back a lot.
Neil Cavuto is right that it shouldn't be left or right, but it is left or right because there are Trumpists who seem to find absolutely nothing wrong with how that summit went. Brett Baer calling it surreal. I get it. Surreal is not a huge criticism, but still, it's Brett Baer after all. This is almost equivalent to calling it treason for a Fox News host. Britt Hume, the senior political analyst at Fox News, saying Trump finally asked whom he believes on Russia interference, gives a vague and rambling non-answer with renewed complaints about Hillary's server, says he trusts U.S. intelligence, but made clear he takes Putin's denial seriously. Lame response, to say the least. And then even during Hannity, when Hannity's guests started criticizing what took place, Hannity immediately interrupts and tries to prevent CIA Chief of Station Daniel Hoffman from explaining what he means. Then another panelist tries to say, well, why didn't Trump stand up to Putin? And very quickly, Hannity interrupts, and lo and behold, the segment ends.
You have devoted your life to the CIA. And this ought to be something that we get a handle of. Here's my point. Julian Assange was 17 years old and hacked into NASA and the DOD. It's 30 years later. Where is our cybersecurity that prevents anybody from being able to do something like that? Where is it? At some point, we got to say, what are we doing that they can still do this?
I mean, I spent a good part of my life collecting intelligence on Vladimir Putin, so let me just take a look at it from his eyes, from the Kremlin. And that's why I believe that if the president had said, look, Vladimir, we know you meddled in the election. I'm not asking if you did, but I know you did. And if you continue to do it, I'm going to make you...
Why do you think he didn't do that? Why do you, when they had an open, frank discussion, why do you think he didn't?
Maybe he did it privately, but I think it would have been good to hold him accountable publicly. And let me just finish real quick with my thought, which is...
So what does that do to our future relations? So I'm going to embarrass you on the world stage. We'll never talk again. Not about nuclear proliferation, Syria,
Wait, let me just finish my thought real quick. Please. We have a multifaceted relationship with the Russians. Going back in the Second World War, we collaborated against Nazi Germany.
That's right.
At the same time, the Soviets were stealing our nuclear secrets. There's a lot of stuff that goes on in where we collaborate, and at the same time, they are targeting us aggressively, and we need to counter the stuff that they're doing to us.
I don't
at the
trust
same time,
them.
Find
They're
areas
a hostile regime, and he's a hostile actor on the world stage. Everybody should be aware of that.
Even on Fox, difficult to suppress the most obvious criticisms of how Donald Trump behaved during this summit with Vladimir Putin. And it's just not going to be tolerated, apparently, by Sean Hannity. And yeah, this is actually happening. It's difficult to believe, but this is what's going on. And if nothing changes in November at the midterm elections, the House and Senate will be de facto complicit because they are not going to hold Trump accountable for this or for anything else. And meanwhile, to round it out, Rush Limbaugh's commentary was that the real threat is the American media, which is just about right, and very, very dangerous stuff going on.
I feel like Putin's probably jealous of Trump, that he has Fox News, that he has Rush Limbaugh, right?
You think?
Because, yeah, I mean, sure, Putin has RT, but
he has more than just that.
It's not like they compliment him in the same way, right?
No. You should. I've been watching some. We don't get it often because it's in Russian, but I am now with more frequency getting clips from Russian not RT TV, but just Russian television stations that are broadcast in Russia, and it's glowing about Putin. Oftentimes they brag about how Putin has got Trump by the whatever. It's amazing, actually, what's going on. I don't think Putin's jealous of that. I think what Putin maybe is more jealous of is that there's enough bamboozleable people in the United States that Trump could win. Like, if I were Putin, I'd be thinking, I've gotten Russia to vote for me to the extent that the elections are fair. But I actually kind of have to work for it. Like, I need to be a clever authoritarian to actually get people to support me. Trump's a boneheaded fool, and he still was able to bamboozle people. Like, Putin probably wishes that he had the American electorate to bamboozle rather than the Russian people.
Yeah, and there's a good case to be made that Trump was able to do that, but only with Putin's help.
Yes,
and we've been investigating that.
Yeah, and that's exactly what we hope to figure out. Okay, got a voicemail today on our voicemail line 219-2 David P. It's about equality of outcome. Let's take a listen.
Hey, David. I just wanted to kind of maybe take a little issue with the whole concept of the left looking for equality of outcome and not equality of opportunity. I think that to have a certain level of equality of opportunity, there has to be certain outcomes that are provided to all. Like, everyone has to have the outcome of being able to go to the doctor when they're sick. Everyone needs to have the outcome of having access to a quality education for there to be equality of opportunity. I don't know if those are really opposing forces in the way you kind of framed it a little bit in your, Why You're Not a Socialist video.
Yeah, okay. I think that I just disagree with the language.
Yeah.
Being able to go to the doctor is not an outcome. It's the opportunity. Having the opportunity to go to the doctor with your sick. I just think that you're mistaking what are outcomes and what are opportunities.
Yeah, being healthy would be the outcome. Same thing on education, right?
Yeah.
I feel like the opportunity to go to school, right, that's the opportunity.
Yes.
Being successful, that's the outcome.
Exactly. Yeah, I think it's just misunderstanding maybe some of the semantics and the language around it. I think some of the outcomes that you're talking about, the outcomes will naturally be slightly less uneven if opportunity is actually equal, and that's where I think we should be focusing. But I don't know if maybe I'm misunderstanding exactly what the caller meant. We've got a great bonus show for you today. We'll talk about Elon Musk calling one of the Thai cave divers a pedophile and now apologizing for it. We will also talk about a new report from up the road at MIT, which says that a quadrillion tons of diamonds lie between 90 and 150 feet below the Earth's surface. And CVS has fired 2 employees who were filmed calling 911 on a black woman who they believed was using a counterfeit coupon for adult incontinence products. A very, very bizarre story. Get access to the bonus show. 2 ways to do it. Become a member at www.joinpacman.com. Coupon code is available. Vote soon 18. Option 2, become a patron for at least $5 a month at patreon.com/David Pakman Show.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.